Check out my Iron Warriors Battle Force Bismarck.
Spiking bits.
Alright, welcome back, Hobby Maniacs. We have done it. We have dug out my amalgam of Iron Warriors cobbled together over the past few years, starting in the early 2000s. This was my very first painted current era army, meaning with the new current, I guess, vehicle kits, because we used to have the old Mark 1 kits. You guys probably see them these days and you're like, those look stupid. They did. These look way better, but these were way more expensive than the old Rhinos, and a lot of people had to save up to get these particular models here just because they were so expensive back in the early 2000s. Turns out hobbies are expensive, and they have always been expensive, and they will always be expensive. You just gotta, budget it in or afford it. So this is my very first painted current era army, post 2000 kind of Mark plastic kit variant upgrades that you see here. Crazy stuff, but it happened and we upgraded. Now, jumping over to the painted units themselves, these are all the plastic Kaos Warriors with the old pewter shoulder pad upgrades. I don't know if you can see this here, but the majority of these guys, they have pewter bodies with pewter shoulder pads. Even the melted guns and things, all of those are pewter components that they used to put out back in the day. There actually used to be an Iron Warriors box set you could buy that would come with this Warsmith here that I converted over to a standard Baer, but he actually had this grabby claw that I used for my sergeant, believe it or not. So a lot of conversions in here. They don't look like conversions these days because the models are so much more dynamic, but back in the day, this was definitely a sight to behold. I feel like at least for me it was, and I had a blast converting this stuff. Now, speaking of conversions, I've got some of my favorite conversions of all time right back here. So there was a time when you used to be able to take a Basilisk in your Iron Warriors army. You could have one. You could actually have 4 heavy supports, and one of them could be a Basilisk, which was pretty awesome back in 3rd edition, I won't lie. So we had one, we converted it up. This is a dinosaur, I think it was a saber-tooth tiger skull. So we call him Squeak the Basilisk. We used to take him in all our armies. And there was a time, you probably recognize this particular kit here as the Vindicator Kit. But there was a time back in the day when this was actually a Forge World kit, believe it or not. This came from Forge World. These are not the original. This is all resin. Every piece of this top, the sides, the front turret, the front dozer blade, all from Forge World. It was crazy that was actually a thing back in the day. Now it's all plastic, of course. But man, very exciting times. Like I said, digital technology and design processes from Games Workshop have really come a long ways. Now, I did use some putty and sculpted all the teeth and everything on there and put some eyes on them, and thus Blinky the Vindicator was born. And speaking of putty, you can tell these obliterators, while they do look like your standard pewter obliterator from back in the day, they are actually converted out pretty good in a lot of cases. You can see this guy here has a non-standard head, but we did a lot of conversion, a lot of putty work there for some of the stuff. This always seems to be a fan favorite for a lot of people. It's not my favorite, but a lot of other people like him, so you got to respect that. He has 2 missile launchers there. This guy here is a little converted out. Lots and lots of little conversions and a little details here and there is what makes this army and a lot of other folks' army out there really, really unique. Now, as far as using these for anything, there was a time when I used them as normal Space Marines. So I have things in here like multi-melts. I actually built up some land speeders that weren't quite finished. I've got different things that you normally wouldn't see, like Stalker pattern, Rhinos over here, which we're going to get to in a minute because you can tell those painted a little bit different. I've got a Thunderfire cannon, with a Warpsmith manning that thing right there. So obviously not Chaos, but can use it for a lot of different things. A lot of their weapons are magnetized, believe it or not, as well. Like you're going to see a lot of places here. Like for instance, well, maybe not that guy. Thought it was that guy, but apparently not. But he's got an arm. So I have literally a little cache of weapons that I can switch out and put on all the different guys to make them modular and make them playable as whatever I may need, because, you know, rules editions change. As I found out, this army is roughly 15 years old, and you can tell it's been added to over the years. Like, we started out with this stuff and the rhinos and the predators, which obviously are not super competitive these days, but we still had to have them back in the day. And in 3rd edition, you had to take 40% troops to tournaments. You had to take a certain amount of things to tournaments to even get on the board and even be able to play. So a lot of troops were required. A lot of things that you might not necessarily see these days were also required. And of course, I magnetized a lot of that as well, just so I could switch it out. And I have a couple of different turrets that we utilized as well, that I super enjoyed. And speaking of magnets, when the Terminator Kit came out in the early 2000s, I guess mid to late 2000s, Terminator Kit come out for Kaos finally, and they got an upgrade. They went from being those big cumbersome pewter dread Terminator models to these bad boys here. Now, of course, Thunderhammer Storm Shields were all in vogue with Space Marines, so I needed some for Chaos. Can't play them in Chaos, but I needed them. But that didn't stop me from magnetizing my models and still being able to switch them back and use them as the Chaos models that they actually were. You know, Combi, Plasma, and Power Sword guys right there. So all these guys are super modular, able to be fielded as pretty much whatever for the most part. So sometimes making every option you could possibly need, it might not seem like it in 2005 when they're a new kit, but 10 years later, 12 years later in 2017, well, now I can use them as anything I want. Counts as, right? So just some food for thought there when you're starting to plan out your next army. Like, well, hey, if I add magnets and I spend a little extra time painting up all the different weapon options, you never will truly know what you might need in the next 10 years. But then again, we might all be playing with holograms, so who knows? This all might be completely moot. It's hard to say, right? So getting over to the meat and potatoes of the army right here, we got a plastic converted Abaddon the Despoiler by my friend Joe Carlson. Picked that up from him many years ago. Did a wonderful job. Who knows if we'll actually ever get a plastic Abaddon model, but you know what? This is good enough for me. And then I've got my Billy Badass Kaos Lord right here. There was a time when you could field a Kaos Lord on steed, on bike, on jump pack, with lightning claws, with power fist, pretty much every weapon option that I could see. It was like the 40K Fat Kid buffet of Chaos, and I loved it. So I made this guy, and you could literally use him for anything out there. I took some smoke launchers, puttied them up. I took an arm off of Defiler and just sculpted some weapons on the front, and he was pretty much whatever I needed him to be. And in most cases, he was 100% WYSIWYG, which was pretty awesome as well. Then again, in the mid-2000s, there was Vulcan Hestan, and he became my Vulcan / my Sorcerer Lord / my Chaos Lord. Anything I needed him to be, fully modular. I could switch him out with different weapons. I could throw a jump pack on him if I needed to, or this flamethrower arm so he could be Vulcan, and I could pretend these guys were salamanders if I wanted to. Throw that counts as love there. So remember, modular builds count as anything. You know what I mean? Like, we're not all ballers on a budget, so we got to make our hobby ends meet where we can, and magnets are definitely a way to do it. And then back here, rounding up the end of this tour, of this awesome 40K showcase flashback, we've got the Havocs, all sorts of missile launchers, all sorts of las cannons, kind of cobbled together from a bunch of different kits over a couple different eras. Here, these actually are not finished. I never finished the Hazard Stripes. Look at that. These were my salamanders from back in the day when I counts as 5th edition Space Marines, believe it or not, because that just happened. Sometimes you just got to roll with the punches and play what you want, play what you love. And then these guys right here, more near to where we are today, was when I started picking up the airbrush and actually pushing paint through it. You can kind of see what happened here. Got some pretty fresh yellows, I feel like, and really knocked. I think I knocked it out of the park with those steel colors there. Obviously, they don't match, so you got some new stuff in with the older stuff. Maybe they grabbed them from the Space Marines or their Iron Hands or something outside of the Eye Terror. So you can kind of see the transition of many years of adding to my collection, and I'm sure a lot of your collections out there will look exactly the same way when you take the older stuff from the early 2000s, add in the newer stuff, the newer kits. And as you gradually start progressing and becoming better at painting, instead of just using the airbrush to push a wash, this was literally the first thing I ever used an airbrush on right here. And that was just to spray Devil in Mud on bolt gun metal spray primer. And now I'm up to this level right here just by watching some videos on the internet. So that's pretty much it, folks. Thanks for hanging in there and checking out my old/new Iron Warriors hobby showcase. I could not tell you how many points are here. Probably at least 3,000 to 5,000 of them. I don't have any super heavies, but we can always easily rectify that as well. And don't forget my dope little Defiler conversion here, grabbing a little Imperial Fistman's. Never was a fan of the original Defiler model, so I wanted to do something a little different. So I had an extra Predator turret, and thus this Defiler conversion was born, and we put them on a base because it's very hard to figure out where people always wanted to charge me, or I wanted to charge people, and I wanted to be fair about it and be like, all right, we're doing everything base to base instead of, oh, my leg's out here, oh, my leg's out here. It's all about respectability on the tabletop, and that's what I tried to confer with this particular conversion and model right here. So again, thanks for checking out my hobby showcase and giving me a reason to go diving in my closet, locate all this great stuff, and relive all these awesome hobby memories from the early 2000s.
Deleted scenes, bonus content, and all the interviews and post-game wrap-up videos can be located in the Hall of Veterans on thelongwar.net. Visit thelongwar.net today and try a week completely free with no strings attached. That's not all. Thelongwar.net is also your hobby resource for exclusive early access with an ad-free experience to all your favorite videos. Members of the Hall of Veterans gain early exclusive access to multiple hobby videos.